What if I told you that the quiet, methodical hum of the world's most powerful central banks has been interrupted by a signal they never expected to receive? A signal emanating not from a major economy like the United States or China, but from the heart of the Middle East, from Iraq. This isn't a drill, and this isn't speculation based on fringe forums. We are witnessing a coordinated, deliberate, and undeniable shift in the global financial posture towards the Iraqi dinar. And the evidence is not in the loud proclamations of politicians, but in the silent trillion-dollar movements of the institutions that truly control our financial destiny. The red alert is not a siren you can hear. It's a series of transactions, policy alignments, and geopolitical maneuvers that, when pieced together, form a picture so clear it cannot be ignored. This is the story they aren't broadcasting on the nightly news, the foundational tremor before a potential earthquake in the global currency order. So, I need you to do something for me right now. Clear your mind of everything you thought you knew about the dinar. Forget the hype, dismiss the naysayers, and for the next critical minutes, focus purely on the evidence I am about to lay before you. This is not just another video. This is a briefing on what could be the most significant wealth transfer opportunity of our lifetimes, and your attention to every single detail from this point forward is absolutely paramount. What you do with this information could very well define your financial future, so let's not waste another second. The foundation of this red alert status rests upon a confluence of three tectonic plates shifting within Iraq's economic and political landscape. And the first and most critical is the nation's desperate and now actionable pivot away from a petrodollar existence. For decades, Iraq's entire economic identity was chained to the US dollar through the oil trade, a relationship that provided stability but at the great cost of absolute dependency. However, the geopolitical winds of 2024 and 2025 have catalyzed a change so profound that central banks from Frankfurt to Tokyo are taking note. Iraq's government is no longer just talking about economic diversification. They are legally and operationally enacting it with a speed that has stunned observers. The key piece of evidence here is the aggressive implementation of the new banking and financial transparency laws, which are explicitly designed to comply with international anti-money laundering standards set by the SPUFT network and the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF. This isn't window dressing. This is the grueling, unglamorous work of rebuilding a financial system from the inside out, and it's a prerequisite for any currency that hopes to be taken seriously on the world stage. The Central Bank of Iraq, or CBI, has been given unprecedented autonomy to pursue this goal, and their primary weapon has been a relentless crackdown on the black market dollar trade within the country. You've seen the headlines about dollar auctions being restricted and certain banks being penalized. Most people misinterpret this as a sign of weakness, but the opposite is true. This is the CBI surgically removing the cancerous elements from its financial body, deliberately causing short-term pain for long-term international credibility. Every time they close a loophole used to smuggle dollars to sanctioned nations, they send a direct signal to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank that Iraq is ready to play by the rules of the global financial elite. Furthermore, the recent and highly symbolic series of bilateral trade agreements with powerful neighbors like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and even Turkey, which include provisions for settling trade in local currencies, including the dinar, is a direct assault on the dollar's hegemony in the region. This is not a theoretical discussion anymore. Invoices are being settled not in USD but in IQD and SAR. This creates a tangible, growing external demand for the dinar beyond its borders, which is the first and most crucial step in building a foundation for a revaluation. When a country's currency is only used domestically, its value is artificially suppressed. But when it becomes a medium of exchange for international trade, its value is determined by a much larger and more dynamic market. Central banks are on red alert because they see Iraq successfully building this external demand pillar, and they are positioning their own reserves accordingly, anticipating the moment when the dinar's value adjusts to reflect this new, robust reality, a reality that Frank's 2025 prediction suggests is not a matter of if, but when. Building upon this foundation of internal reform and external trade expansion, the second and perhaps most compelling reason for the heightened state of alert among global financial institutions is the direct and undeniable link between Iraq's national survival and the strengthening of its currency. Let's be brutally honest, the Iraqi government is facing an existential fiscal crisis, a mathematical impossibility that can only be solved by a significant increase in the value of the dinar. Here is the simple, powerful equation that every central bank analyst understands. Iraq's national budget is almost entirely funded by oil revenues, which are priced in US dollars. However, the government's massive expenses, from paying the salaries of millions of public sector employees to funding infrastructure projects, are paid out in Iraqi dinars. The official exchange rate has been pegged at a specific rate for years, but the black market rate has often been far worse, creating a destructive gap that drains the state's dollar reserves. The government is essentially selling a valuable asset, oil, for dollars, and then having to use those dollars to buy back its own, weaker currency at a loss to meet its payroll. It is a fiscal bloodletting that cannot continue indefinitely. This is why the 2025 budget and the government's entire economic platform is predicated on a de-dollarization of the domestic economy and a strengthening of the dinar. Why? Because a stronger dinar directly and immediately solves this crisis. If the dinar is revalued to a higher level, the government's oil-derived dollars suddenly have exponentially more purchasing power when converted into dinars to pay for domestic programs. A single dollar would cover multiple times the salary and pension obligations it does today. This isn't a speculative investment theory, this is basic national accounting. The state's solvency depends on it. This is the why behind the intense reforms we discussed. The CBI isn't doing this to make speculators rich, it is doing this to save the Iraqi state from fiscal collapse. When you understand this, the entire narrative shifts. The revaluation of the dinar is not a distant dream. It is a core component of Iraq's national security and economic survival strategy for 2025 and beyond. Central banks are on red alert because they recognize the inevitability of this move. They see a sovereign nation with immense natural resources and a growing population that has reached a point of no return. The path of de-dollarization and currency strengthening is the only logical path forward, and the sophisticated algorithms and risk assessment models used by these central banks are all pointing to the same conclusion: a major currency recalibration is coming. They are not waiting for a public announcement. They are analyzing the flow of capital, the success of the new banking laws, and the political will in Baghdad, and they are positioning themselves in the quiet pre-dawn hours before the official market opens, which is precisely why you are seeing these subtle but significant movements in the forex markets and international reserve allocations that hint at a preparation for a new, more significant player in the global currency arena. So, where does this leave us? And what is the final, conclusive piece of evidence that ties this all together into Frank's 2025 prediction? It lies in the realm of high finance, in a world of bonds, sovereign wealth funds, and international debt, the true battleground where a currency's mettle is tested. The ultimate signal that a currency is ready for prime time is when it begins to be used for purposes beyond simple trade for goods. It must become a store of value, a unit of account for long-term contracts and debt instruments. And this is precisely the frontier Iraq is now crossing. The most significant development, one that has sent a shockwave through the back channels of central banking, is the serious, advanced discussion of Iraq issuing its first sovereign dinar-denominated bond since the 2003 invasion. This is a game changer of the highest order. For decades, any international debt Iraq needed to raise was issued in US dollars, reinforcing its dependency. But a bond issued in Iraqi dinar is a monumental declaration of sovereignty and self-confidence. It tells the world, we'll believe in our currency so much that we are willing to let international investors bet on its long-term stability and strength. It creates a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle. The bond raises capital for development, which strengthens the economy, which in turn strengthens the dinar, making the bond more valuable. This is how a currency graduates from a local medium of exchange to a global asset. Furthermore, the planned revitalization of the Iraq National Development Fund, a sovereign wealth vehicle designed to manage the country's surplus revenues, is also being structured to hold and invest in dinar-denominated assets. This creates a massive internal and perpetual buyer for the dinar, soaking up supply and creating constant upward pressure on its value. When you combine this with the fact that Iraq is sitting on some of the largest proven oil and gas reserves on the planet, reserves that are only now being fully developed through strategic partnerships with global energy giants, you have a perfect storm for a currency revaluation. The economic output is set to explode, and the financial architecture is now being built to ensure that this new wealth is reflected in the national currency. Central banks are on red alert because their models are forecasting this exact scenario: a resource-rich nation successfully transitioning from a post-conflict economy to an emerging market powerhouse, with a currency that is drastically undervalued relative to its future economic potential. They are not looking at the Iraq of 2005, they are analyzing the Iraq of 2030 and beyond, and they are buying the currency of that future nation today at a historic discount. This is the core of the prediction. The red alert is not about a rumor, it is about a fundamental reassessment of Iraq's economic trajectory. The train is not just leaving the station, it is already accelerating down the tracks, and the question for you is not whether it will arrive at its destination, but whether you have secured your seat for the journey. Now, you have the information. You understand the internal reforms, the existential fiscal imperative, and the sophisticated financial instruments now being deployed. This is no longer a mystery, it is a logical sequence of events unfolding in real time. But information without action is merely entertainment. So, here is your final and most important call to action. This is the moment where you decide if you are a spectator or a participant. Go to the description box directly below this video. I have left a crucial link for you, a direct, no-cost pathway to a special briefing that details the exact time-sensitive steps you can take right now to position yourself ahead of the coming financial shifts. This is not a generic guide, this is specific, actionable intelligence. Do not let this moment pass you by. The window of opportunity for getting in at this level, with this much evidence pointing towards a single outcome, does not stay open forever. The central banks of the world are not waiting, and neither should you. Click the link, secure your access, and take the first definitive step towards aligning your financial future with what we have broken down today. This is your chance. Seize it.